I'm Henry Bonsu and this is Doubling Down, where every week we tackle a topic that's got you talking on social media and beyond. Joining me today are the author and blogger Richard Phillips, International Relations Advisor Madeleine Young, and former Green parliamentary candidate Chidi Oti Obihara. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, it was, according to a leading business newspaper, an outpouring of hatred that shocked the nation. But it wasn't just Germany that was appalled by the sight of thousands of far-right activists rallying in the eastern city of Chemnitz. Shockwaves ran throughout the EU and beyond. Could the nation that caused 2 world wars really be embracing the Nazi past, which hung over it like a shadow for so long? The answer is more complicated than that, but it does lie in the recent past. While Chancellor Merkel's policy of welcoming nearly 1 million refugees triggered a surge in support for the AfD party and the anti-Islam Pegida group, the roots of their popularity go much deeper. Despite receiving around 2 trillion euros since reunification in 1991, Eastern Germany, the focus of most demonstrations, is still relatively poor and resentful of foreigners and wealthier West Germany. These tensions, simmering for decades, are now out in the open, exploited on social media by forces which are trying to unite the right across European countries. The question now is, how far could this go? Could the AfD, the third largest party in the German parliament, really unseat Chancellor Merkel's CSU allies in their Bavarian stronghold? What implications would this have for policy? What dangers could this pose for religious and ethnic minorities in Germany? And could we really be facing the prospect of Europe's most powerful country returning to its darkest days? So panel, that's the context. I'm just wondering what you think. I trust you've all been to Germany. Nod yes if you have. Richard, when you look at what's happening in Germany, are you chilled to the bone? What do you think?
Well, as a Jew, naturally what happens in Germany in this sort of context alarms me. Yeah. But in all honesty, I don't think it's obviously not just Germany. Yes. It's not even just the right. It's on the extreme left as well. I mean, we're seeing, a sort of rise of fascism, if you like, and, in lots of different ways. But I mean, specifically, we've got in Sweden, in Italy, in Holland, pretty much everywhere in Europe, and of course here. Yes. It's unnerving. What it actually means.
But Germany's special, though, isn't it? Because the history was so bad, and it was perceived to have made such an amazing recovery. It's to the point where, when you look at polls, of the most respected countries in the world, it's not just the Scandinavian countries that do well. Germany is at or near the top every single year.
Angela Merkel pulled off an astonishing PR coup when she admitted all the refugees into Germany, because basically she reversed a perception of Germany that had lasted for 70 years since the Second World War. Suddenly there seemed to be a non-racist, open and generous society. And I think that was all fantastic. As per happening in Germany now, yes, it's worrying, but it isn't just there. Yeah.
Madeleine, what do you think? You've been to Germany, haven't you?
I have been to Germany, and I have quite a few German friends. I have a very close German colleague who was remarking that, if ethnically German, if we can say that, European origin, saying, if I brought home a person of African origin or a person of Arab origin, my parents would disown me. Right. And I think that there's probably been a lot of simmering sentiments of maybe of racism. Just this kind of people have felt the need to hide their true feelings or their true political orientation. The influx of immigrants or refugees has brought that out. When they see that it's supported in public, you have a turn politically. And I'm not justifying any of that kind of sentiment, but you see France has a very difficult, I'm a French citizen as well, a very difficult time dealing with cultural diversity. The United States, with the surge of Donald Trump, a very difficult time dealing with cultural diversity and success or multiculturalism. And I think Germany is having a hard time remembering what happened in the past, and also having a hard time dealing with difference as non-conformity, and how do you deal with a new society that's very different. The UK, I think, has had a little bit of an easier time dealing with the proliferation of diverse British people, and maybe Germany is needing to address that on a social level and a cultural level.
Okay, Chidi, you've also been to Germany. Have you felt comfortable wandering around, Western Germany and Eastern Germany, wherever you've been?
I've never visited Eastern Germany, but I worked in Bavaria, in Munich to be exact, a couple of decades ago, actually, for .com entity, and it was,
Yes.
I think, one of those moments where you start to see modern Germany really at its fore.
Yes.
So it saddens me slightly when people talk about Germany within this historical context, because you can tend to forget that Germany is a very different country now.
It's a very big country, over 80 million people.
The reunified Germany, this is post-1992 Germany, is a very different country now than it's ever been, in its recent past. And modern Germans would be horrified if they thought the rest of the world was seeing them only for the rise of this neo-Nazi party in the Bundestag, because simultaneously the Greens in Germany are doing exceptionally well. Yeah. So I think the story is more complicated. I think the story is a story of fragmentation in Germany's political discourse. I think that people are finding niches in politics they didn't want to support in the past.
And I mean, Germany's peace movement and Green movement have always been very much stronger than almost anywhere else in Europe.
Absolutely, and gaining momentum, which is tragic because it might be overshadowed by the fact that so are the extreme right. I feel very strongly for both of my co-panelists because the idea that one of the members of the far right talked about removing the Berlin Holocaust Memorial graves, it speaks to a really ugly level of anti-Semitism, as well as rejection of immigration, which does...
And anti-Islam, Islamophobia is very strong.
Absolutely, which does bring us back to the question about why is it that there are still parts of Eastern Germany that are so alienated from the mainstream, because this is where it's emanating from. It's emanating from a part of Germany that has a lot of structural unemployment, that suffered under very old industries that are having to evolve. I think the context is both of those things. It's economic depletion in the East, and it's the fragmentation of Germany's political discourse.
Okay, well, we don't live in Germany, even though we've all visited and I spent time there, but somebody who has a little bit more to say about this than us is going to talk to us in just a moment or two. So let's introduce her, because the recent upsurge in far-right activity has caused soul-searching in Germany and cost the country's spy chief his job. He's called Hans-Georg Maassen. He tried to downplay the violence of some protesters amid allegations of collusion between him and the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD. But how deep has the soul-searching been, and how are Germany's diverse communities responding to the sight of neo-Nazis mobilizing on their streets? Well, let's talk to Professor Yasemin Karakasoglu, Professor of Intercultural Education at the University of Bremen, and she joins us on the line from there now. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. What's your reaction to what you've been seeing on the streets of Chemnitz and other Eastern German cities?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for putting me into this very interesting round of people. Yes, what was our reaction, or my reaction also, on what we could see there in Chemnitz? Of course, it's very scaring, it's shocking, it's alarming to see that this big amount of people really dare to show old Nazi symbols and raise their hands to the greetings, to the Hitler greetings, and that in front of them a group of policemen and women stay and don't know what to do in this situation, feel like they don't have any power to stop this.
Was there a feeling among you Germans in the western part of the country that this was something particularly Eastern, something that you've seen in the early 90s, and something that has come from a suppressed rage in the post-communist era? Is that how you analyze it?
No, this would be too short. I think some people try to analyze this way and try to put the blame on the Eastern Germans as they were the ones, the ugly Germans, the ones that didn't learn from the Second World War, from the Nazi time, and later on they didn't get the right education, so to say, to understand democracy. We also face racism and fascist attitudes in the western part of Germany. We have the NSU murders on people with foreign background. We also had an attack 2 years ago in Munich in a shopping mall where 9 people were killed only because they looked foreign. So we cannot put the blame only on the Eastern Germans. But what is the fact is that people who are not so familiar in living together and seeing people from different ethnic and national backgrounds or religious backgrounds in their everyday life tend to be more against foreigners, be more discriminating. This is one thing we know from the researchers. But what I would say is that in the last at least 20 to 30 years in Germany became a country of immigration, and the politicians, both from the SPD and from the CDU, failed in getting this known by the country, by the population of Germany. They didn't manage to, and they didn't dare, they didn't really try to inform the people that the country has changed, the face of the country has changed, and this will never get back again to something it was considered to be pure German or whatever.
Well, that's it, because, I mean, under the old Grundgesetz, the basic law, German identity was based in das Blut, you know, blood. And that was changed, I think, during the time of Gerhard Schröder. I'm just wondering how you feel as a German of Turkish origin, and how you might imagine that my colleagues here in the studio, two of whom are of Jewish background, one of whom is also like me of African background, if we were in Eastern Germany, do you think we would be targets? Do you think we would feel uncomfortable?
It's not easy to say, because let's say I myself, I really feel scared, and I think it's shocking what happens, what can happen in the middle of the day on the streets of different cities of Germany. And as I also was very much involved in reactions on the early 90s attacks on foreigners, on refugees in the eastern part of Germany. At that time, I didn't want to go to Eastern Germany because I felt threatened. And I think what is most important is that you have this feeling to be threatened, even though in the general cases in German big cities, you wouldn't face any attacks. But there is a general feeling on insecureness, and if you see that the head of the Office for the Protection of the Constitution himself has right-wing attitudes, then you, of course, feel insecure in a country like this.
So if people like the head of security, the intelligence services, who's been now moved to a position of state secretary, are believed to be collaborating with the AfD and the far right, how are those people from diverse communities like you reacting? How are you mobilizing and responding?
Yeah, there is a letter that was published by the so-called New German Organizations. This is an association of immigrant organizations in Germany on the 15th of September. And the heading was "Not Our Homeland Minister." And there, these organizations accused Seehofer, the Minister for the Interior, not to protect, not to secure people of different backgrounds in their lives in Germany. And they said he's mentioning the migration or the migrants as the mother of problems in Germany. He's also not attending the National Integration Summit, which brings together all of these organizations together with the Minister for the Interior to have an exchange on ideas. And at least at the end, he also supports the President of the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, Maaßen. And these 3 points, they accuse Seehofer not to be behind them, not to protect them, and to support an unsecure atmosphere for people with diverse backgrounds in Germany. And they call him for protecting them. And
well, it sounds as though you're trying to hold them accountable, but it's not easy if the rot is at the top. Professor Yasemin Karakasoglu from Bremen University. Vielen Dank. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you again. Okay, panel, I'm just wondering what you make of that, because you get the impression from the professor that this is a society that is still in denial to some extent, and the denial is there at the very top. Richard?
Denial of?
denial of the reality that Germany has changed. It's a multi-faith, multi-ethnic country, and you have to fight this cancer with all your might.
Yes, but I think there's something, nationalism, first of all, I don't think it's just Germany.
Yeah, I know that, but we're focusing on Germany.
I know,
Germany
but I
is
think
totemic in Europe.
Yes.
In fact, in the world.
Yes, but I think we've got to think, I think that what afflicts Germany is probably not very different from that which afflicts most places. It seems to me that as much as I despise nationalism of all kinds, I think it's always a force for bad. The problem is that, and we would, ideally, we'd have a world where tribalism, group identity didn't matter.
Right.
But the truth is, almost every country is dominated by one ethno-religious community or another. It might not be formalised, but it is.
Yeah.
And the moment that status quo starts getting threatened, even, marginally, at the margins, by 5%, 10%, this starts to happen. It's completely irrational, but it does. And somehow, without condoning that, I think you've got to kind of
somehow
recognise
try to understand it. But recognise it. But I think people are trying to recognise it and sometimes call it out when it manifests itself horribly. But beyond that, Madeline, what do? Because we can just throw our hands up in the air and say, well, this is how people are.
What do we do? I wish I had the best answer for that.
Because everybody around Europe is grappling with this now.
Yeah, I think the way countries seem to have the best outcome when it comes to a change in diversity is definitely working with people's strengths. So the United States is a great example and a challenging example of that. You think of the many waves of immigrants from Europe, and then you have immigrants from Asia, and you start to have different groups of immigrants. For example, Nigerian Americans now are incredibly more educated than the mainstream American population. So America at times has really big difficulties, for example, Muslim Americans, for example, Latin Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, challenges with that. At the same time, you have amazing success and talent and innovation coming out of this multicultural country. And then other countries, for example, that have more experience with diversity, say France, a country of which I'm a citizen, has had this colonial past, if you want to call it colonialism, invasion, etc., where the French have been interacting with these countes, maybe in an unhealthy way, and then these people have become French. And now you have
but they still struggle because, a lot of people, when you go there, je suis musulman, je suis pas français. I'm a Muslim, I'm not French.
Well, people are French Muslims. There are French Muslims, and France has a difficult time accepting that. My French side of the family is of European French origin, and we have a difficult, unfortunately I don't, but we have a difficult time, and I'm of French Ghanaian origin, and that's a challenge in my own French family. But when I go to France, I look around and I say, these are my people. I look like this person. I look like all these people. And it's beautiful. It's challenging. And I think Germany is just coming to terms with that and didn't have that kind of organic relationship, unhealthy relationship with colonialism or the US relationship with legal immigration or invasion, again, if you go far enough back. So I think that's the challenge.
I'm just wondering, though, because I still think, and I'm putting this to you, Chidi, that Germany does stand as an outlier in a way. Because yes, we've had the rise of the right in all these other countries like Sweden, like in Italy, like in the Netherlands, of course here in the UK. But there is something particularly worrying if it's Germany, do you not think?
I agree. You can't take Germany out of its historical context completely. But I think that it's really important to judge it by its full historical context. And Germany has been through quite a lot as a country within Europe. In 1992, it reunified. It virtually doubled in size. And we're at a point now where Angela Merkel did the most amazing thing.
Was it a big mistake for her to say, look, come to Mutti Merkel in 2015 and 1 million people came?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was because it achieved the goal she set out to achieve, which is to show Germany as a completely modern, multicultural state, which it actually is in very many respects, in very many large cities. But the tragedy is that we're in a period, as I said earlier on, of such severe anti-Semitism that in a city as multicultural as Berlin, Berlin has its Holocaust memorial being threatened by someone who now has 90 seats, over 90 seats in the Bundestag.
Alternative for Deutschland.
Absolutely.
AfD.
The AfD are now the biggest opposition party, standalone opposition party, in the Bundestag for the first time since the Second World War. And so the context that you paint of Germany having gone through this horrific war and now being back at the point where nationalist socialists are pointing these accusative arms at the other, is a valid point.
Absolutely, because they're doing it openly and without fear. I'm going to get to social media and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Without going to social media, though, I need to very quickly say that I'm terrified more of the bandwagon effect than I am of the ASD themselves. Because the Greens are doing even better. They're another niche party who are doing very, very well. We need to pay attention to that as well. So we don't feed these outliers.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Time for that social media. Here's what you've been saying on Twitter. And Malcolmite says the far right are on the rise all over Europe, but especially in Germany, where the Nazis are growing. All you hear is Islam this and Islam that, but no one wants to address the extremists in their own midst. Cybermatron says Germany has been here before, and I don't mean the 1930s, I mean the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s, when different types of far-right groups, the NPD, the FAP, the Republikaner, etc., had surges of notoriety and also temporary success in the regional or national parliament. James Moore says the right of the far right is something to be scared about. The rise of the right, should I say. If they are not stopped, we should see something akin to Hitler's uprising in Germany. The world doesn't want to go through that experience again. And here's a slice of what you've been saying on Facebook. Maurice says this is how Germany will fight back against far-right populism, with a concerted effort to change the dialogue on immigration and the backbone to stick with what you know is right. Shola says, where Angela Merkel welcomed refugees, Frauke Petry, a rising far-right leader, has said border guards might need to turn guns on anyone crossing a frontier illegally. Where Ms Merkel has urged tolerance, Ms Petry has embraced the angry populism now running through Europe and the United States. And finally, Wachuku says it's generally accepted that during economic crises, the extremes of the political spectrum tend to gain some traction. However, in the specific case of this global recession, I think it's highly improbable that we'll see a return to power of fascists and Nazis in Germany. Now remember, you can always get involved in the conversation on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram by using the handle DoublingDownTV. So panel, what do you make of what you heard? Madeleine, I'm going to go to you first, because our final correspondent, Wachuku, said, look, you know, it's highly improbable that we'll see a return to power of fascists and Nazis in Germany. And one of our other correspondents said, well, we've seen this before. Cybermatron said, 70s, 80s, I mean, 90s, remember the Republikaner? They were hardcore, and you saw a surge in attacks on refugees in hostels in places like Zollingen and Mölln. So we shouldn't get this too overblown.
I think you could see a rise to power of people who might have Nazi and far-right sentiments. I think that can happen in any country. Take the United States, for example. Take Marine Le Pen. That can happen. I don't necessarily think it will overturn all the progress of the country, and I don't think it can possibly overturn and override the diversity of the German people as it stands today. The German population, by birth, is now more diverse, and those people are German citizens. And Germany will have to reckon with that, because I do not think the world will tolerate another Holocaust. I mean, unfortunately, there are genocides that happen on the planet, but indeed. I do not think Europe is ready to overlook that.
I'm just wondering, Richard, you saw the sight of Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, the other day, being dragged or going willingly to the European Parliament and having their finger wagged at him and a vote taken against, taken against him. Do you think we could be soon in the extraordinary situation where Angela Merkel has to come before the European Parliament and to be told, Germany, you're not doing enough about this cancer in your midst?
No, I think it's highly unlikely. I think Angela Merkel has been pretty much, as far as I can see and from what little I know, a force for good. It's possible that she'll be unseated and somebody much more disreputable will take over. But I just want to say one thing. I think the bandwagon effect on an international level in a modern world of communication has had a big effect on this.
Especially social media.
Social media. I'm noting that apparently, and my German is non-existent, as you know, Henry, they were using a phrase called, is it Leugenpress?
Lügenpress.
Lügenpress, yeah.
Which dates back to the Nazi period. Lying press.
Lying press or fake news.
Fake news, yes.
I mean, it's just not very original, and I think, you know, there are a lot of incredibly irresponsible, unfortunately, we've seen a rise of some very irresponsible politicians, Donald Trump being in the, you know, who are exploiting this in a completely amoral way. And I certainly think well, first of all, Brexit put wind in the sails of Trump. Trump has put wind in the sails of the people in Sweden and now in Germany. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed. I don't quite know how. Well, of course, Trump's downfall, ideally.
Mobilizing of other parties that believe in the decency of all other human beings. I mean, Chidi, I offer it to you as a Green. Could the Greens save Germany?
Well, it's a really good question. I think, without exaggerating, that they've done so much so far that they do stand a good chance of being able to do that. They've helped Angela Merkel form the coalition that exists right now. They've gone from something like 9% in 2013 to something like 16% of the vote now. To put it in comparison, the AfD had 5% in 2013, and they came out with 12% in 2017. So the challenge with the German system as it stands right now, for me, in managing this upsurge of the wrong kind of Me Too, if you can call it that.
Yeah, very briefly.
The challenge with this is that the funding for the AfD is about to change.
Yes.
Now that they're in the party, they have 2 million votes. They're about to get up to 100 million euros a year in funding. Someone needs to look at German political funding as a matter of urgency and stop it. They can't be allowed to just feed off the sort of negative publicity and negative feelings they create. That would be wrong.
All right, thank you very much indeed. And that's it for this week. Thanks very much to my studio guests, Richard Phillips, Madeline Young and Chidi Oti Obihara. For news of next week's topic and to get your views in early, do check out Doubling Down on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.